yes, it's time to unleash the big guns, the game changer of movies and franchises. It's time to summon and launch the Avenger Initiative.
Those were up, and they did.
We're smart, and my...
He told me enough.
No, I.
Here's Chuck.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review, and this movie review is going to be for the very final MCU review of the month, and the very final movie to end Phase 1. And we all know what that's obviously going to be. It was a movie that really revolutionized the MCU as a big franchise, and that's going to be for none other than 2012's Marvel's The Avengers, also known as Avengers Assemble, in Sumerius. The very first Avengers film. Tells the plot as well. Loki, the adopted brother of Thor, teams up with the Chitauri army and uses a Tesseract's power to travel from Asgard to Midgard to plot the invasion of Earth and become a king. The director of the agency S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury, sets in motion project the Avengers, joining Tony Stark, Iron Man, Steve Rogers, Captain America, Bruce Banner, the Hulk, Thor, and Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow, and Clint Barton, Hawkeye, to save the world from the powerful Loki and the alien invasion. So how's this made? Well, ideas for a film based on the Avengers began in 2003 with Avi Arad, the CEO of Marvel Studios, first announcing plans to develop this film in April 2005. After Marvel Enterprises declared independence by aligning with Merrill Lynch to produce a slate of films that would be distributed by Paramount Pictures. Marvel discussed their plans for a brief presentation to Wall Street Analysis. The studio's intention was to release individual films for the main characters, establish their identities, and familiarize audiences with them before merging the characters together in a crossover film. Screenwriter Zach Penn, who wrote The Incredible Hulk, became attached to the film in 2006 and was hired by Marvel Studios to write the film in June 2007, in the wake of the 2007 to 2008 Writers Guild of America strike. Marvel negotiated with the Writers Guild of America to ensure that it could create films based on its own comic book counterparts, including Cap, Ant-Man, and the Avengers. After a successful release in Iron Man in May, the company set a July 2011 release date for the Avengers, but in December 2008, Marvel Studios reached an agreement with Paramount, an extension of a previous partnership, which gave the company distribution rights for 5 future Marvel films. Casting began in October 2008 with Downey signing, though Don Cheadle was also reported to be reprising his Iron Man 2 role of War Machine for the Avengers. He stated he did not think the character would appear in the film. At the same time, 2 major prospects occurred for Marvel. Jon Favreau was brought in as executive producer for the film, and the company signed a long-term lease with Relay Studios to produce 3 other big-budget films: Iron Man 2, Thor, Cap vs. Avenger, at their Manhattan Beach, California complex. And in February 2009, Samuel Jackson signed a 9-picture deal with Marvel Entertainment to play Nick Fury in Iron Man 2 and other films. In September 2009, Edward Norton, who played Bruce Banner in Incredible Hulk, stated he even wanted to return for this film. He didn't want to back out. He actually seemed very open to playing in the Avengers. But of course, because Marvel got in the way of his stuff, didn't want to do his version of things that would have been phenomenal with the character of Hulk, he backed out and Mark Ruffalo replaced him. In the next month, Jon Favreau stated he would not direct the film, but would definitely have input and a say. Favreau even expressed concerns that it was going to be hard because he was so involved in creating the world of Iron Man. Iron Man is a very tech-based hero, and then with the Avengers they're going to be introducing some supernatural aspects because of Thor. Mixing the two of those works very well in comic books, but it's going to take a lot of thoughtfulness to make that work and not blow the reality that they created. Then in March 2009, actress Scarlett Johansson replaced Emily Blunt, portraying Natasha Romanoff for Iron Man 2. A deal that subsequently attached her to the Avengers. Then the following day, Marvel announced the film's release date was pushed to May 2012, a full year after Thor and Cap. Hemsworth and Hiddleston joined the film's cast in June, returning as their characters Thor and Loki. And then in July 2009, Penn talked about the crossover process, stating his job was to kind of shuttle between the different movies and make sure that they finally were mimicking the comic structure where all those movies are connected. There's just a board that tracks here where everything that happens in this movie overlaps with that movie. He was pushing him to do as many animatics as possible to animate the movie, to draw boards so that they were working on the same visual ideas, but the exigencies of production would take first priority. And then at first, Penn tried to reduce Thor's role in the script because he had doubts about the character's possibility to succeed on film. He changed his mind once Hemsworth was cast as Thor. The film always intended to use Loki as its villain, but Penn noted that early decisions had considered using Red Skull instead, and they ended up going with Loki. So, after the film was extensively shot, marketed, the Avengers premiered in Los Angeles on April 11th, 2012, and was released in the United States on May 4th as the final film of Phase 1 of the MCU. And what were the critical reactions? Drum roll, please. They were critically praised. The film received praise for Whedon's direction and screenplay, visual effects, action sequences, acting, and musical score. The film grossed over $1.5 billion worldwide at the box office, setting numerous box office records and becoming the third highest grossing film of all time at the time of its release, and the highest grossing film of 2012, and the first Marvel production to generate $1 billion in ticket sales. In 2017, it was featured as one of the 100 greatest films of all time on an Empire magazine poll. It received a nomination for Best Visual Effects at the 85 Academy Awards, among numerous other accolades. 3 sequels have been released: Avengers Age of Ultron 2015, Phase 2, Avengers Infinity War 2018, Phase 3, and Avengers Endgame in 2019, also Phase 3. Now, as for my reaction, well, this was where I finally realized that all these, like Iron Man, Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, were all setting up a grand idea that seemed impossible to achieve in a movie with so many characters. But when this hit theaters in 2012, it proved every one of its doubters wrong. I remember seeing this movie in theaters during my final year of middle school, and holy shit, I could bet this was how people felt when they saw Star Wars: A New Hope in theaters for the first time when that movie released in 1977. That must have been the reactions to it. Very similar. This film is easily my second favorite of Phase 1, and it really solidified me as an MCU fan fully. I think this kind of solidified anybody as an MCU fan fully. This film was just fun, epic, well shot, and hey, even the overloaded comedy here actually works. You want to know why? Because this was only the beginning for the more darker threats to come, so it was better to be lighthearted here and save the dark stuff for the follow-ups. It's a film that future generations are still gushing about today, much like previous generations did with such classics like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Indiana Jones. It may not be perfect, but The Avengers lives up to its promise and delivers quite a punch. I feel The Avengers struggles that most superhero movies do with finding a way to naturally introduce its characters in a way that doesn't seem forced or formulaic. They do a decent job for what it does, and there are certain times you will feel the campiness of older works coming on as you view the film, and truly just have to sit through it to get to the action and eventually will be at hand. Besides that though, there isn't many flaws, the acting is good, Samuel Jackson may take a line too seriously or two, but it's all in good fun. And Tom Hiddleston again as Loki is a major standout, and I even enjoyed the return of Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man and Chris Hemsworth's Thor, as well as an improved performance by Chris Evans as Captain America, and a great performance from replacement Hulk actor Mark Ruffalo, who was good in this film, and its sequel, Age of Ultron. I never read the comic books before seeing this, but this is definitely a comic book movie. It was specifically made for hardcore fans of comics, and I appreciate the care Joss Whedon gave to this movie. It was very entertaining to see Tony Stark, Thor, Banner, Rogers, Romanoff, Barton, Maria Hill, Agent Phil Coulson, Director Nick Fury all interact with one another, and not be a directed DVD animated feature like those Ultimate Avengers films from Lionsgate. And Cap Steve Rogers was like fighting World War II just yesterday, and he had been recently woken from his frozen sleep, struggling to fit in his modern-day world today with all the technology around us. Then he got the Godfather and Thor is not from this world, and doesn't understand modern technology on Earth as well, despite kind of being banished to Earth. Dr. Bruce Banner has been on the run from the government since the events of Incredible Hulk, practicing medicine in third world countries. He hasn't been the Hulk in 2 years. It's a secret, and Tony Stark is still the same since Iron Man 1 and 2, playing with his high-tech toys and inventing new technology. So you get all of them to interact and play well together. Well, director Joss Whedon is his secret to making it all work. The highlight of the film for me is how Joss Whedon has all these characters interact. Deep character development was not needed for the film. This is what the respective movies are for. Thor, Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, the First Avenger. Those were the character developments. This is them all coming together. He does a great job of not forcing dialogue. The interaction of the characters is much more organic than I would have ever anticipated, and that is where Whedon deserves some more credit. He took what appears to be a very silly premise with silly-looking characters and made it completely work. Seeing as the Avengers comics date back to the 1960s, you can tell he not only did his homework, but he really cares deeply for the material, and his passion definitely shows on screen. You can tell what a comic book fan writes and directs a comic book movie because it clearly showed in all areas of production for this film. Going through the film, I honestly thought that a lot of the cool mutant action scenes would be strictly Iron Man and Captain America, but we did such a great job giving each mutant their 15 minutes of fame, and by the end of it, you seriously feel like, wow, this character is a badass. And yeah, even Hulk. Mark Ruffalo's Hulk was done perfectly well in this. Here. Like, Hulk's role in this movie is awesome, and it made me an even bigger Hulk fan after watching this movie. Well, yeah, but sadly though, yeah, Norton is still better. I kind of wish we still saw Norton come back because his Hulk was also even more badass. The theme of this movie, in my opinion, is man versus man. And this is because throughout the entire film, there's some sort of conflict going on. The first and main conflict that appears is Loki attacking S.H.I.E.L.D., takes control of Hawkeye and Dr. Selvig in order to steal the Tesseract and use it for its own purposes. A second conflict that appears for the films between Thor and Loki. When Thor still considers them brothers, Loki retaliates and says that he is not really his brother, and actually should still be the true ruler of Asgard. And with the costumes that have been chosen for this film, it helps create the aspect of the heroes being more than a normal human. Even with Hawkeye and Black Widow's been trained pretty much from birth to become a killer, and Hawkeye has advanced skills in marksmanship. While Thor's costume, he is wearing something that helps to prove that he is not from Earth and from another world. Now for Iron Man, he made his own super suit that could do almost anything, which includes keeping him safe from being torn up from the rotors of the ship and S.H.I.E.L.D. That S.H.I.E.L.D. was functioning from after an attack from Loki and his minions, and honestly, when I first saw Iron Man 2, I had no idea Scarlett's character actually was Black Widow. I thought it was just a random character introduced because, like I said, guys, I had no idea this was actually building up to a big crossover. Here. And I thought they were all purely standalone films like with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man film. And the Blade stuff, the X-Men stuff, I thought it was also just being just like that. Here, but no, it turns out these 5 movies, wait, was it 5? Yeah, 5. We're all building up to this whole film that seemed like, I remember being just from direct-to-DVD animated films from Lionsgate called the Ultimate Avengers movies. And now they were making a live-action version of it with all of them teaming up. Like the weird conflict adventure, Heart and Sense of Wonder, that I kind of once found through action figures and stuff. Some only insight from weird-looking and dusty other toys, populated with soldiers, flying scientists, Norse gods, green monsters, and incredibly objects in black leather, are all here. Now, also wanted to mention something. I know this is just meant to be a review, but I feel like mentioning that you're all wondering, if you ever did have a story arc in the MCU, what would it be? I'm glad you probably would have asked that because I actually thought of a story arc for myself in the MCU because these 6 movies, when I saw these 6 movies, they felt like a complete story arc for me, for my life. So I feel like mentioning that if I had a story arc as a fictional character in the MCU, it would be start with this movie, The Winter Soldier, Age of Ultron, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. That would entirely be my story arc in the MCU. Those 6 films. My fictional self would be a different name. It'd be Harold Hartigan. It kind of feels super-ish. Let me know what you think of that name. And yeah, he would obviously start off as some kind of obnoxious slacker that lives on a farmhouse in Maine with his older brother Grayson Hartigan and dad Franklin Hartigan. Franklin would originally be recruited for the team, but the Chitauri obviously would have either arrived that night for supplies and to try to snatch Harold and Grayson, which is going to be explained more in Infinity War's review, for that reason. But Franklin battles them, but is wounded and dies, so Harold pretty much feels responsible for not being there to assist his dad, and he decides to take his dad's former place as the Hartigan super name and then have to join the team to kind of make up for what he had kind of started out as. And his superhero name would be the Troper, who operates a mech machine for battles. That would be my hero I'd make up. His hero wouldn't have powers. And along with assistance from Grayson, obviously, he joins the team in stopping Loki and has to learn the lesson of growing up and working with others in this kind of installment to kick off this story arc. And how it also go is he also does better develop as a character throughout the film, matures a little more, kind of much like, guys, you gotta remember, like, this is kind of how Luke Skywalker started off in A New Hope. And this chapter would end with him about to return home to Maine with Grayson, but they both get stopped and say that they've been recruited in S.H.I.E.L.D. as gratitude for their assistance, and they will be trained to become S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, and Harold then tells Grayson that they are home, and that's where the first chapter of the story arc ends. The next chapter will be saved for Winter Soldier's review. But back to this review. The plot of the movie is straightforward but done magnificently. Loki, previously seen in Thor, wants to wreak havoc on Earth by letting a group of aliens enter Earth through a portal, and it's up to the Avengers to stop him, but first they have to solve the rivalries and bitterness between them, and the fight scenes between the superheroes are just fucking awesome. I was so excited to see Thor and Iron Man battle it out with Cap, and the scene was just plain epic. The music and soundtrack in the movie are good, and it did a nice job eliminating the action, and trust me, there's a lot of action here. The visual effects are fantastic, one of the best I've ever seen in a film, and they will leave you in awe. Hulk along with Iron Man do a good job of adding humor into the film, and all the scenes with the Hulk left everyone at the cinemas laughing too, and it's pretty obvious that Squad mates think highly of him, as seen in the scene where Stark and Loki have a confrontation. We have an army, we have a Hulk, and the scene was what did it very well. And also really at the final battle at the end, we get our iconic shot of all 6 OG Avengers together in a circle. Let's also not forget when Hulk smashes Loki into the floor. Enough! You all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by men. Puny god. Like, oh my god, opening night, I can still remember the laughs and cheers from the theater nearly 11 years ago when that moment happened out of nowhere, and even a month after its release, like, everyone was talking about that moment. Like, they were all like, I really loved that moment when Hulk straight up took on Loki with several throws. Even a Lego store clerk, during the time this movie was out, mentioned it at a checkout when I went to get a Lego set. Like, the whole scene was still talked about. Many other great qualities even include every major Avenger even having an independent movie to introduce them, get to know them, and they feel right in place on a team. Even Black Widow and Hawkeye don't feel out of place despite not having movies of their own. Well, Black Widow technically was introduced in Iron Man 2. Hawkeye was partially introduced in Thor in one scene. And although Black Widow did get her own movie around nearly 9 years after this movie came out, Hawkeye had his own television miniseries 9 years after this movie as well. Epic fighting scenes and action like the rest of the Marvel movies. Joss Whedon did an impressive job for directing this movie. Triumphant soundtracks symbolize the Avengers assembling for the first time, solidifying the Marvel Cinematic Universe and set up major plots for future movies, and even show that Marvel can handle crossover movies well. Even have Tony Steve's rivalry in this movie, which literally does very well in setting up Captain America Civil War. And also, this movie has a perfect post-credits teaser where we see the soon-to-be villain of the Infinity Saga himself, the Mad Titan Thanos. He would become the big threat the saga was setting him up to be, and upon first watch though, I had no idea who he was, because I had not read comics around that age. I was like, who's that guy? And it turns out, he was one of the most feared comic book foes of all time, Thanos, and he was going to be soon getting his own movie 6 years after this. He did make a brief appearance in Guardians of the Galaxy first though, and had a no post-credit scene in Age of Ultron. However, sadly though, the movie does have a few minor nitpicks here and there. First nitpick is while Loki is still one of the few memorable MCU villains, the Chitauri on the other hand are just generic troop soldiers unlike the comics where they were human-eating shapeshifters, and basically the scrolls of the Ultimate Universe but deadlier, and some scenes involving Captain America's character development were cut, but he already did have some character development in the first Avenger. Even though Black Widow and Hawkeye don't feel out of place, they both feel like background characters due to their lack of backstory and proper contributions, mainly Hawkeye. Also, speaking of the latter, I should probably mention, I don't like how Hawkeye spends most of the film as brainwashed, and even Jeremy Renner felt that wasn't a very wise move for our introduction to the character. It didn't even have his own film before this. Like, there can also be times when the film feels a bit too TV directed and a bit too jokey, but like I said with the jokes, this was only the beginning of what was soon to come, so I don't think it would have worked to be dark right away. The darks, they kind of did a wise thing saving the dark stuff for the next films. Because this was just the beginning of them assembling, them meeting, so you're gonna have, so yeah. If this is the first installment, you kind of have to be lighthearted. You have to be a little goofy. If it's only the first installment franchise, then yeah, you can still have some comedy here. So it made sense to be lighthearted. And plus, hey, the overforced comedy here actually worked. Disney needs to have their forced comedy be more like this, only having it when it needs to happen, than just trying to force it in every second, like they do now. And final bad quality, Cap suit. Yeah, I can agree with fans on that. Cap's costume in this movie looks way too ridiculous. Like, come on, S.H.I.E.L.D. Of all the suits you give him after being frozen for 70 years, this is the suit you make him wear. Really? This is it? But despite those bad qualities, I still find the film phenomenal in every way, shape, or form. So in the end, The Avengers is a perfect way to change up the MCU and really set up and begin the big guns for what was soon to come next after this movie's success. I highly recommend it to anybody that is a comic movie fan and to buy it as well. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank The Avengers 2012, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you want to see a film that changed and revolutionized a new era for comic book films and summer release movies, then I would easily buy and watch this movie for your sure. And if you are wondering how I'm going to rank The Avengers 2012, I'm going to give The Avengers 2012 a 9 out of 10. Man, we just completed Phase 1 in an entire month. So, I wonder, man, what would happen next? We would see Tony Stark again after this movie after this movie, we would see Tony Stark again, and his next biggest challenge would be none other than, oh fuck. Wait a minute. I know what happens next. To kick off Phase 2. Fuck! Kill me. I'd rather be shot than watch that fucking piece of shit ever again in my life. Fuck no. Can there be any... Do I seriously have to review this, guys? Our next MCU review, which thankfully won't be till March, is gonna be for the worst fucking Iron Man movie ever. God, I forgot Phase 2 starts off shit. And until then, guys, that'll be it for this review. Thank y'all for watching. And the MCU reviews will be back on in March. And if you like this and want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.